All right, welcome back, everyone. I will just briefly orient ourselves for the recording. It is 1:17 p.m. This is the afternoon of the fifth day of hearing. It's a Friday on September 15th. This is phase 3 of the hearing in the court reference proceeding in the case of City of Marina versus RMC Lonestar, Monterey County Superior Court case number 20CV001387. And where we left things off was partway through Mr. Osias's cross-examination of Mr. Titsa. And before we broke for lunch, I asked Mr. Osias if when we return, he could give me an estimate of how much cross-examination he anticipates, at least for Mr. Titsa. I didn't ask about, I didn't intend to ask about the other witnesses at this point. So we can start there, and I'll look to you, Mr. Osias. You're still on mute. There you are.
Thank you. I estimate an hour more with Mr. Titsa, maybe a scotch over that.
A scotch, great.
And then I hope to start and complete Dr. Trudell next. So,
okay,
like to get ready.
Thank you. That's helpful. With that, I think I'll hand things back over to you. Let me see. Actually,
I'm looking for Mr. Titsa.
Mr. Titsa. Now I found it. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Go ahead.
If we could, I'm going to go back to where I had my notes. Okay, can we go to Marina Exhibit 62, page 9? Oh no, I got to adjust my view again. Page 9. Here I've got me showing up. Marina 62, page 9. And you can just scroll down a little bit. The sentence that starts on line 7. Do you see the sentence that starts, information and opinions presented here? You see that sentence, Mr. Titsa?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So it says the focus is largely on the accuracy and adequacy of the HCMs incorporated into the SWIM and the Loeffler model, correct?
Yes.
HCMs, again, just is hydrologic conceptual model.
Yeah, hydrogeologic conceptual models. Yes.
Thank you. Okay. And then if we can scroll down to line 19. Oh, I'm sorry. I went too fast. Go back up to line 10. There we go. Because this is what I was asking right before lunch. Do you see the sentence that starts with a key focus? Because I tried to use that word.
Yes.
Okay. And so I think I asked you, wasn't a key focus the representation? And I said FOSVA. You have it spelled out here. Do you know what I mean by FOSVA?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And you wrote this and that's correct, right?
Yep.
Okay. That's still true.
Yeah.
Okay. And then if we can go down to the line 19, you see the sentence that says, nevertheless, on line 19.
Yes.
It's also addressing the SVA going all the way to the coast, correct?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
And the last sentence, implications of this deficiency are a key focus.
Yeah.
Okay. And then on line 26, actually, I guess it starts on line 25 with the word as.
Yes.
And here you're critiquing Mr. Loeffler's model because this fundamental deficiency of the SVA going all the way to the shore was not corrected.
Yes.
Okay. And then on page 16, on line 5, the sentence that starts with as shown. You see that?
Yes, I see it.
And once again, focus on the SVA and the 1,8400 foot aquitard extending all the way to the shoreline.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Correct. Okay. And on page 17. Line 6.
Yes.
Sorry, wrong line. Line 11, can't read my writing. Criticism again of the Loeffler model. We've already discussed, it's not really his model, but I know what you mean. Artificially compartmentalized by simulating an extension of the SVA and 18400 to the seashore. Same point, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you make that same point again on page 22. Line 9, starting with the word first.
Yes.
Okay. And then on page 24. You'll see on line 6 at the end. The model extends the SVA all the way to the shore where it, and to areas where it does not exist. Do you see that?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. I'm not sure I got them all, but would it be fair to say that given the number of times you say this, this is really core to your critique of both the swim and Mr. Loeffler's variation of the swim?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Can we go to, actually, let me go to Exhibit 62, page 10. Line 20. Okay. You see the
Yes.
sentence that starts with near the coast and south of the Salinas River?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, your lawyer will tell you that.
Sorry.
won't be
Yes,
included in
that's
the
right.
transcript.
Yes, I see it.
Okay, thank you. You're citing to a geophysical investigation, Exhibit Marina 22, Gottschalk and all, 2018, right?
That's correct. Yes.
And then you also cite to the Marina GSA 2020, which I think is what you described for us earlier, right?
That's correct. Yes.
And do you really mean GSP there instead of GSA?
Yes, I mean GSP. Thank you for that correction.
Okay, but I understood what you meant. All right, and then if we could go to page 11.
Let me just, at the risk of being too detailed, the reference is Marina GSA because they were the authorizing agency, but it's referring to the GSP. So
Yeah, the content is in the GSP.
that's
The
correct.
author, if we want to call it that, is the GSA. Is that a fairer way to say it?
That's a fair way to say it.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your attention to that detail. On page 11, lines 12 to 14. This is again the investigation relied upon by you, correct?
That's correct.
It was relied on by you, pardon me, in both the GSP and for this work now, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. And if we go to page 26, line 13, This is a more complete title than you included in the text of the testimony, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So this says it was prepared for Marina Coast, so it wasn't prepared for the city of Marina?
I believe it was for Marina Coast. I'd have to go back to the document to make sure it's cited correctly. I believe it is.
Okay, who'd you get it from?
I don't recall. It was many years ago. I don't recall if we downloaded it ourselves or if we were provided it by the city of Marina.
This is not a published article, correct?
I believe it's publicly available. It's not published in a journal, if that's what you mean.
That is what I meant.
Yeah,
It's not a published peer-reviewed article in a journal.
I believe that's correct. Yes, it's available. It summarizes the work by Dr. Knight and her team, and I believe it is available on her website.
Okay, and
But
if
I
we
don't
could,
recall exactly where I downloaded it from.
you bet. If we could go to exhibit 68. And page 9. In the right-hand column, where it says AEM data source, you're citing to the same reference, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. And on page 10, same thing.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and that relates to the, I guess I should say, that relates to the bottom figures in each pair. Is that correct?
That relates to each of the inset tiles, and those were taken from a companion 3D representation of Dr. Knight's data that was in a package called Leapfrog. And so using that package, I extracted the hydrogeologic, the hydrostratigraphic data and the water quality data.
Okay. And that's true for the page, we don't have to go back to it, but the page before was the same answer, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and the top pair on both pages is from the GSP, which relied in part on the same reference, correct?
That's correct. It was actually taken, these insets, and in fact, the figure was taken from the GSP. And when developing the GSP, the information was obtained from Dr. Knight's Leapfrog model of the Gottschalk investigation.
Okay, and can we see page 11? The upper figure, is that from that? The writing is really small down below on the left.
Yes, that's taken from the same source.
Okay, thank you. And then on page 23. Again, same set of answers as we just went through, correct?
That's correct for the upper tile. Yes.
I object. You need to ask a question.
Well, it was a question, but you would like me to ask a different question, correct?
That I think I understand the objection to it was a question, but the objection was to ask the question more specifically, I think.
The top two inset panels are from the same Gottschalk reference.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Okay, we can take that down. It has an exhibit number 22, which you used as we just looked at in your testimony. Did you know that exhibit was not admitted into evidence?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
Who gave you the exhibit number?
I believe the exhibit number came from Mr. Spalding.
Okay. Are you aware that Mr. Lilly said unpublished references to AEM studies are unreliable and that the reliance on AEM materials should be from peer-reviewed published articles?
No, I'm not aware that he said that. I guess I would disagree with that statement.
Okay. Can we go to exhibit? I'm sorry a little bit, I stepped up the pace, but I'm trying to get this done. So exhibit 64. Marina, exhibit 64, pardon me. You recognize this document, Mr. Titsa?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And if we could go to page 21. Okay, so it's document page 21. Now I'm going to have to do a conversion. Let's see. If this is PDF page 21, then we need to add 7. There it is. So is this PDF page 28? I can't see on my screen, just so when I ask for the next one, I'll add the right digit. Yep, 28. Okay. Thank you. So pardon my color blindness, the sort of amber or mustard, maybe mustard colored line is the model domain. Is that correct?
Yes.
Extends into the ocean, does it not?
Yes, it does.
Your testimony and slides do not criticize the model for having the model domain extend into the ocean, correct?
No.
And you see the dark blue striped area extending into the ocean?
Yes.
Now that's the 180, 400-foot aquitard extending into the ocean, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And above that would be the 180 aquifer, correct?
Yes.
Extending into the ocean?
Well, this particular figure doesn't show it extending. It doesn't show its extent, or does it?
No, it does. It only has aquitard, sorry.
But presumably I'll agree it extends into the ocean.
Okay. So could we go to PDF page 70? And can you read the figure title at the bottom?
Extent of model grid.
Yes. So first, just define for us model grid.
Well, that's the area over which the model is discretized.
And your testimony and figures did not criticize this model for having a model grid that extended into the ocean, correct?
No.
Okay. And if we can go to 72. PDF page. Oh, I'm sorry. I said 72, didn't I? Well, it should have been 79, but we can skip it. Let's go to PDF page 85. And this doesn't seem to have a title, but I want to point out, in case they're not standing out enough. There's maroon colored or red colored lines, some going mostly north-south, some going east-west, but more like northwest to southeast. Do you see those?
Yes, I see the cross-section lines.
Okay, is that what okay, and they're labeled in the explanation as cross-section lines. And they have a letter, for example, the A line has A and A prime. Is that how you say that?
Yes.
Okay. And that's to depict what?
The ends of the line.
And what's the cross-section line to depict?
Well, usually it's a cross-section of something in the subsurface.
Okay. So if we could go to actually, let me ask you to look at a cross-section line E prime to E. E prime is in the ocean, correct? And E
Yes.
is inland?
Yes.
Okay, so it's mostly perpendicular to the coast. Is that right?
Roughly, yes.
Okay, and D prime are a little more perpendicular.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, so let's start with the D series. And the primes are in the ocean, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so if we go to 99. And this is a cross section along the D prime profile line, right?
Yep, that's correct.
And your testimony, exhibits, slides do not criticize the swim or Leffler model for either the domain or this cross section, correct? They're not mentioned. Is that correct?
So that's not entirely correct, if I could explain.
That's what we're here for.
Okay, good. So what we criticize is that the conceptual model shows the aquatards extending all the way to the shore in the near shore area, and that's the extent of the cross sections that we look at. There are a lot of different places where that either is or may be inherent in this report. And so we don't criticize every place in the report where that's shown or where that may occur. What we do criticize is that these aquatards are shown as continuous from inland to the coast, because, and let me rephrase it to, I'm using the word we, I mean I, because I'm taking responsibility for this opinion. It's my opinion. What I do criticize is that there are reliable data that indicate that that is not the case.
Okay. So without singling out, for example, this page for that criticism, to the extent this page shows the SVA extending all the way to the coast, your criticism would be the same as all the ones I pointed out to before. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so I know it's a little hard, but the SVA is black? Is that what color it is?
Looks like.
And it's right under what I would call lime green. Just so we could try to get organized, which is a top layer.
I have to say it's very difficult to see on this section. And I'm assuming that the coast is where the topography first starts to rise rapidly if you go to the right from where it says D. So right at about a little bit between 35,000 and 40,000 feet. That's where I believe the coast is. And I'm hard pressed if this is an example of the hydrostratigraphy that's being used in the model to call this oh, wait a minute. It's backwards, isn't it? So D prime is in the ocean.
D prime is in the ocean, is it not?
Yes. Okay. All right. So,
Would the coast be where it starts to fall off?
so
Oh,
the coast is where it starts to fall off. That's correct. So the coast is between 90,000 and 100,000. So let me just say that this is not a good example of showing a conceptual model. It may show some data, but it requires a lot of squinting in order to be able to see the principal components. So with that said, I do see that if the lime green is the Purissima and the 400-foot aquifer is there. Okay, yes, I see. I'm having a hard time making it out, but
we can blow it up.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Well, I say we, the royal we. Maybe one more even.
Please.
How's that?
Yep, that's a little better. Yes, if I understand it correctly, that shows in the near shore, it shows kind of in a mustard green color, the dune sand aquifer, and then it shows a sort of muddled area heading out to the shoreline, which I'm assuming that the very uppermost portion of that is the SVA, and that the middle portion of it is the 180-foot aquifer. No, that can't be. Let me get myself oriented here. Well, based on the color scheme, that would appear to be right.
So the 180-foot aquifer extends under the ocean, correct?
That's correct.
And that's not a focus of any criticism in your testimony or slides, correct?
No.
And the 400-foot aquifer extends under the ocean, correct?
Yes.
And that's also not a topic of any criticism in your testimony or figures, correct?
That's correct.
And the deep aquifer extends under the ocean.
Yes, that's also correct.
Okay, and then let's stay zoomed in a little bit just because it's helpful to go to the next page, which I think is the other profile that extends under the ocean. Again, E prime is in the ocean. So to the extent we normally think of the ocean being to our left, this is the other way. And my questions are, this also shows the 180-foot aquifer extending under the ocean.
Yes, it does.
Okay. And at least on this one, your opinion is the profile shows the ocean about where the line starts to angle down?
Yes, that would be my best guess based on this figure without verifying by double checking.
Okay. But this figure didn't come in. Setting aside the SVA extent, which again is not super easy to see, but we know what your criticism of that is. And the 180 aquitard, 180-400, extending to the ocean. No other criticisms of this HCM concept in the Montgomery and Associates model, correct?
No, my focus is solely on the hydrostratigraphy between the dune sand aquifer and the 400-foot aquifer and the aquitards. I'm not focused on anything else and not saying one way or the other in terms of whether it should be criticized or not, but I'm not focusing any criticisms on it.
Well, you had a chance to criticize it and you chose not to. Is that correct?
No, my assignment was specifically to look at the Leffler model as it pertained to answering the questions about does variable density flow model as it relates to the questions that were being posed to the administrative hearing.
So is it
Those
your
questions are, to me, are focused above the deep aquifers and not on the rest of the structure.
Sorry, you said focused on the deep aquifers?
Not focused on the deep.
Not focused. And do you consider the 180 a deep aquifer?
No.
And so extending under
180
the
to 400 in the deep aquifers. And my testimony is focused on the dune sand aquifer, the Salinas Valley aquitard, the 100 upper and lower 180-foot aquifer, the 400-foot aquitard, and the 400-foot aquifer. Those are the intervals of interest, in my opinion, to answering the question that I was asked to provide an opinion on.
And notwithstanding that, you expressed in no document a criticism that the 180-foot aquifer extended under the ocean.
That's correct. I did not. To me, that's I don't have a criticism based on that.
Thank you. And do you see, let's use the 400 on this figure, only because it's a little bigger for the moment. That's sort of mustard colored, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank you. And the part that's under the ocean would be permeable, would it not?
Yes, it would.
An ocean could enter there, could it not?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Now, there has to be a reason for ocean to enter, and we won't go there, but it's just that's just a basic foundational fact, correct?
Well, it depends on what it's covered with, but you would ordinarily expect that the subsea portions of these aquifers would be seawater intruded.
Thank you. Okay.
Ms. Kenzie, while Mr. Osias is thinking of his next question,
Mhm.
I want to bring up that the exhibit Marina 22 has been admitted into evidence. In a couple of questions earlier, Mr. Osias said it had not. I'm looking at the transcript of December 12th, 2022. Alan Lilly says, okay. So with that, are there any objections to Marina 21, 22, or 23? David Osias. So I'm accepting the offer that it's a full article. And if that's what it is, then I don't have an objection and the offer that it was cited. Alan Lilly, okay, thank you. So I will accept those three exhibits into evidence.
So we're going to have a fair amount of discussion on this topic, but you could hear my conditional response there and the offer of proof that it was a published article and the testimony today that it is not. And that's relevant because of the rule I recited. And I believe, and I'm not perfect at this by a long shot, if we go to the AHO website for admitted exhibits, 22 is not there.
We have just checked it and it is there. And you specifically represented it was not put into evidence, and it was.
I'm not arguing with what I said because that's what I believed. And I just told you why.
So this sounds like, it sounds like we at some point need to get to the bottom of this.
Yes.
Mr. Osias, do I correctly anticipate that this will come up again with respect to the admission of Marina Coast?
You do.
Right
And
entity.
at
Marina
that
Coast.
time, I'll give you all the references to the various places that I alluded to.
Well, what we may want to do, and let me think about this because it may be helpful in preparation for our final hearing day for me to look at those in advance of the hearing day. It may make our day go faster. So maybe at the end of the day today, we don't have much longer. We can talk about whether it makes sense to submit some of this in writing so that I have a chance to prepare myself better. If this involves a lot of, it just would save time if it involves a lot of going back into the transcripts from previous proceedings, as you can understand. We can each do it on our own time.
However you wish, Wood.
Okay, well, let's think about that. Mr. Spalding, thank you. That was probably an efficient use of, time because I see that there's an issue here.
May I, oh, sorry.
With that, Mr. Spalding, is there anything else we should talk about on that point?
No.
I mean, at this moment.
Yeah, we may move to strike those questions because they're based on a false premise.
Yes, we will get to the bottom of this. Okay, so with that, I'll hand things back to you, Mr. Osias.
I'm sorry.
You can't help it.
May I
I-
clarify something, or is that out of order?
There's nothing for you at the moment, Mr. Titsa. I just want to say my questions about Exhibit 22 that Mr. Spalding is alluding to, I assume are not the ones saying, this is what you relied on this page. He must be referring to, did you know that Mr. Lilly said something?
No, this is what was relied on. I wanted to clarify that that I relied on the groundwater sustainability plan, which relied on that document. So, I just wanted to clarify that it wasn't exclusively or directly that document. There is quite a bit of analysis of that document that is presented in the GSP as well that would need to be considered, in my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Titsa. I did ask you both those questions already. Okay, we can
Okay.
take this down. Which, by the way, had nothing to do with that topic. And if we go to Marina 62, paragraph 7. We look at the top of the page. Is this page 7? There we go. Yeah. The italics, Mr. Titsa, are quotes from some meeting minutes, correct?
That's correct.
Those meeting minutes are not attached, are they?
No, they're not.
And nor were they sent to anybody in this proceeding, correct?
Not by me.
Okay. On page 8. If we can look at paragraph 15 and the bullets. Actually, let me go back. I'm sorry. You don't need to change slides. I just had a follow-up question. Did you quote the entire document there on page 7? The one that was the meeting minutes?
You mean, is that an uninterrupted quote?
No, is it a quote from the entire, is it the entire document?
No, I did not quote the end. I took a quote out of the document and posted it.
Thank you.
Pasted it.
Okay. And on this page, there's more quotes, right?
That's correct, yes.
Also not attached or provided, correct?
One moment here. That's correct. It was taken from my, let's see. Yes, it quotes my statements in an email to the GTAC.
Is that the complete email or only a portion?
That's only a portion.
And not provided or attached, is that what you said?
That's correct.
The we can take this down. So the swim without the Leffler changes is a model for which you have all the model files, correct?
That's correct, yes.
And if you so desired, you could open the model files and turn off what I'll call it a switch, but I'm sure it's got a complicated name, so that it runs ignoring variable density, correct?
That's correct, yes.
And you did not do that, correct?
No, we did not.
And you also have a team of modelers, correct?
That's correct.
And so if you wanted to modify that model, you could have asked your modelers to move the SVA inland, correct?
Yes, we could have.
And you did not do that, correct?
No, it wasn't necessary.
Okay. In order to determine the effect of the SVA in its current location in the model versus a different location, wouldn't a before and after comparison be useful?
It would if that were the objective of our analysis.
But it was not your objective.
No, our objective was to assess specifically the modifications made to the model by Mr. Loeffler. Did they improve the performance of the model over the swim as he proposed? And was it appropriate for answering the question and for determining whether or not variable density, answering the questions posed to the AHO, and whether or not variable density modeling made a difference in answering those questions? And in order to do that, turning on and off a switch to a fundamentally flawed model is irrelevant. And we furthermore didn't have the time available to spend on that.
Okay, so the switch relates only to the variable density aspect, right? You can't turn it on and off a switch for moving the SVA, is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, you can't. You'd physically have to, reattribute the model and
Right.
make some changes to it.
And you're saying since June, when your criticisms of the model were apparent, not the Loeffler model, the swim model, no one on your team had time to see if it mattered. Is that right?
Well, let me go back and correct something. And I apologize for, I didn't know where to fit this in, actually. I went back and over lunch had an opportunity to revisit the timeline that you and I talked about. And if I may, should I answer that now?
It doesn't matter what I say. Ms. Kinsey wants to hear what you say.
So we initially were reviewing the swim back in the earlier part of the year. So there were a couple of GTAC meetings late last year and early this year. And then we received a copy of that model April 20th and made an assessment, and the email that was quoted from that we just looked at, that was sent in June of this year. And then we received the initial report that was authored by Mr. Loeffler on June 20th that I understand was withdrawn after it was submitted. And we did a brief review of that and discussed it with counsel. And then we were sent a retention letter on August 8th is actually when we received that. We received a copy of the updated model also on August 8th, after I believe it was posted by Mr. Loeffler on August 7th. Then we received CalAm exhibits 175 and 178 on August 20th. So that's the timeline. And that's why I say that taking and modifying the swim and running what-if scenarios that were not relevant to answering the question about is the swim as modified by Mr. Loeffler an improvement over the swim, and is it suitable as issued, as proposed by Mr. Loeffler to answer the questions, because that was the question I was asked to answer. I did not have the time to expand that assignment to include what modifications to the model might make it suitable. Making modifications like that, like peeling back the aquitard, is fundamentally changing the hydrogeologic conceptual model and requires a complete new recalibration of the model in order for the model to be valid. So that's not an insignificant undertaking, and it can't be accomplished in the time frame that we had for our model review.
It can't be accomplished in days.
It can't be accomplished and reported on in days. It takes weeks.
And did you ask for your work to be kept secret?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, you talked about the engagement letter. Now you got a more pinned down date. You got the models. You didn't ask Mr. Spalding to keep your engagement on this task a secret, did you?
I'm confused by the question. Normally, when I get engaged by counsel, it's under attorney-client privilege, and it's up to counsel to divulge my engagement. It's not up to me to talk to anybody about it. So I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, it's a simple question whether you asked to be kept under wraps and not disclose that you were.
No, I don't know why I would do that.
I don't know why you would do that either,
Okay, good.
but I wanted to know if you did.
No,
And the answer is no, you didn't.
no, we just put our heads down and went to work.
And so by the time direct testimony was submitted in phase 3 on August 14th, you were at work on this, correct?
That's correct.
And Mr. Spalding knew you were at work on this.
Yes.
Okay, because it was at his behest, correct?
Yeah, he sent the retention letter on the 8th.
Okay.
So my apologies for the confusion, Mr. Osias.
No need to apologize.
Okay.
I think I'm done, but I would benefit from, without being rude, just a few minutes of quiet to go through my notes.
Of course, please.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm finished with Mr. Titsa, and thank you, Mr. Titsa.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Titsa. Thank you, Mr. Osias. Mr. Osias, you're going on longer than Mr. Titsa has now taken a laboring oar, but you're continuing to go on. Would you like a break before we move on?
Yes, I have a variety of documents that I should line up.
Line up, okay.
Walking through Dr. Trudell.
Great. Let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. We'll come back at 2:15. Does that sound okay to you, Mr. Osias? Is 10 minutes appropriate?
Yes, I do want to leave this witness with, I think, what is obvious, which is we have grave concerns still about his surprise presentation with rebuttal and the content of what he relied on, which we'll address later. And should you need more information related to those topics, at least, we may need to call him back. But I don't have any further on the substance of the merits at the moment.
I understand, Mr. Osias, that you're laying a foundation here for future discussion for us. So thank you for that caveat.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Titsa. Let's go ahead now, 10 minutes. I think that'll put us at 2:16. We'll take a 10-minute break and come back, and we will start with the cross-examination of Dr. Trudell.
Video's on, Chip.
All right, I see Mr. Osias. I see Dr. Trudell. I think these are the relevant at this at this time, the most relevant players. So I will turn to you, Mr. Osias, to begin your cross-examination of Dr. Trudell, if you're ready.
Ms. Kinsey, if I could real quick.
Yes.
Dr. Trudell worked, I think, pretty closely with Dr. Kincaid and Ms. Nelson in phase 3. I would suggest for efficiency's sake that it be a panel, although I do understand that Mr. Osias will be directing most of his questions at Dr. Trudell as we did. I can envision a world where there may be some questions that Ms. Nelson or Dr. Kincaid may have better answers to. So I just wanted to raise that.
Mr. Osias, do you have a concern if the other witnesses, it sounds like what we're proposing is the other witnesses are available to follow up if there are questions that they are better prepared to, or in a better position to answer, I shouldn't say prepared.
Well,
With leave that what I do, let me clarify this. I think you do, I will support, if you intend a question to be for a particular witness, I would support, getting an answer from that particular witness, but I may want to hear from,
Right.
if the other witnesses have something to add.
well, so I have two comments, hopefully neither of them controversial. One is that may prevent me from finishing, because I'll end up having follow-up questions with 3 people rather than perhaps 1. And second, if we could use the protocol of they indicate they want to say something and you give them a green light.
I think that's what we did when I crossed. I have no problem with that.
That sounds appropriate, and let's proceed. And if there are any problems, we will address them as they arise.
Can I ask one more question?
Of course, Mr. Bouchard.
Unrelated to the cross, Mr. Osias. I think you'd indicated that there's going to be some briefing and people were citing transcripts. I had mentioned the other day that the parties have agreed to get certified transcripts of the prior hearings where testimony was provided. Would you like me to start uploading those to the AHO site?
Yes, if you have agreements in place where you are capable of sharing those. With the
Yeah,
AHL
everybody,
and everyone else.
all of the parties have them already. We just haven't uploaded them.
Wonderful. Yes, please, at your convenience, if you would upload those, and then citations can be to those transcripts, which will probably be more helpful than to whatever we have. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now I think we're ready. Mr. Osias, it is now to you.
Thank you. Oh, there you are, Dr. Trudell. And you're on mute, Dr. Trudell, so that will not work.
That would make for a short cross-examination, that is for sure.
Thank you, Mr. Osias. Appreciate the heads up.
He's limited to nodding.
I'm sure we're about to get him pinned here by my team. My team is pinning. There we are. Thank you.
Okay, so I'd like to start with actually, can I ask a question? Because it doesn't have an exhibit number. If I want to look at one of the AHO orders, if I just give the date, is that sufficient for your staff to pull it up?
I think so. We will do our best. It may take a moment because they're in different folders, but yes, I think if you can give the date of the order, we should be able to get to that.
So I'm not going to start there, but the date I'm looking for, I think, is March 7th, 2023.
Great. Thank you. March 7th, 2023.
Okay.
You've been heard, and I'm certain my team is working on that.
But to start with Dr. Trudell, let's go to Marina 67 and his slide 13. You remember this slide, Dr. Trudell?
Yes, I do.
And this is one of the examples of bad calibration that you used in your summary.
I don't know if I would call it bad calibration. I'm just, I would call it good calibration and poor or less good calibration, poor calibration, I guess I would call it.
Okay. So look at the vertical scale.
Yes,
And the difference on the left-hand margin between the mustard colored dotted line and the green line is about what?
I would estimate 1,800 milligrams per liter,
Out of how many?
31 to 33,000.
Okay, and on the right side where it's wider, the difference is something close to 33,000, but not quite. And something close to 31,000, not quite.
That sounds about right, yes.
And so your testimony is the green is good and the mustard is not acceptable?
No, I said it's just not as good.
And the difference is 6% or less, correct?
Well, I'd have to do the math, but it sounds like it could be on that order, yes.
Okay. So if you use like a 5,000 TDS scale, they'd be almost on top of each other, wouldn't they?
I'm not sure what you mean by 5,000 TDS scale.
Instead of 1,000 TDS scale on the vertical.
Oh, okay, not 0 to 5,000, but
And
units.
no,
of-
if it stepped
Right.
every 5,000, like a lot of the graphs we've seen, there wouldn't be this big white space between them, correct?
Well, you also wouldn't see the details of the observed count, observed curve as well, or data, the time series data. So
And it's important to see that because you don't think the mustard line is a good fit, but the green line is a good fit.
well, again, you keep calling it not a good fit. I'm saying it's not as good a fit as our data. It's also not a calibration run that was done by CalAm. It's done by us.
But yes, so you confirm they were really darn close. Thank you very much. Is that correct?
No, you're misrepresenting what I said. I think it's obvious that ours is a very good fit to the data points. You can see how the line passes in between most of the data points over the majority of the time series data observed. And the CalAm doesn't. And, you know, I suppose anyone who looks at this graph can draw their own conclusions about which is a better fit.
But it was selected by you as an example to include in your summary slides, correct?
Yes,
Okay, can we look at first, let's go to Dr. Trudell's direct testimony, which I believe is Marina 58. And you recognize this document again, Dr. Trudell?
yes, I do.
Okay, and if we could go to page 22. And I'm hoping it's PDF page 22 also. Yes. Scroll down a little bit, please. All right. And you wrote this document, Dr. Trudell?
did.
Yep, okay, so line 14, there's a sentence that starts with a bolded figure 56A,
Yes,
okay? And it goes on to read, paren, non-pumping conditions, close paren, shows that fresh water, paren, shades of blue. Do you see that?
yes.
Okay, it's not blue, it's shades of blue, so it's more than one shade, plural, correct?
Well, it's a color flood map, so it's not intervals of contours. As you might see in some representations, this is a continuous shading of colors over a range of TDS values.
Okay, let's try to finish by that was a yes or no question. So shades is plural, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And therefore it's more than one shade of blue, correct?
it can be.
You meant it to be more than one shade of blue, correct?
Well, again, it was meant
Intention vague.
to represent a
Right.
range. There's not one single shade of blue that represents all of the water, for example, in the dune sand aquifer. It requires a range of, there are a range of TDS values, and it requires a range of shades, if you will, of blue to represent that range.
Can we go to Marina 59? Figure 56A, which has shades of blue in it. And figure 56A, I sadly don't have the PDF number.
It'll be near the end of this document, if that helps.
That does help. I should have it though. Hang on.
We're getting there. Ms. Mullen is quick.
It's after these, Dr.
There you go.
There it was.
That's
There
it.
it is. Now,
56A.
if we could zoom in on the lower left legend first, even more. So shades of blue could range from less than 500 to 9,000 TDS.
Yes, I would call those shades of blue. Yes.
I would too. Okay. And that testimony we just looked at described those shades of blue as freshwater.
And that testimony didn't refer to all the shades of blue. It just referred to more than one shade of blue, and it was referring to fresh water. So, in other words, the darker of the shades of blue are the freshwater shades.
So after writing this testimony under oath and using the phrase shades of blue, you now want to testify that it means some shades of blue.
Oh, no, they are
Objection, that
shades.
misstates the testimony.
Well, let me stop this. So, Mr. Osias, I think I understand you want to make a point, and I'll give you a little more room for this. But I just wanted to clarify for you. I am aware of that. Your witnesses did a fine job in making this point, I thought, in their summary of their direct testimony. So I recall this point. I recalled this point actually when I was looking at these exhibits and when we went through Dr. Trudell's testimony, and I remembered this issue about the wide range of the shades of blue. And so you can continue on this, but it may be a better use of your time not to continue on this because I'm pretty well aware of the point.
Okay.
I don't know where we left your last question, so you may have to ask.
No, that's fine. I think we confirmed. As I chew on my tongue here, that was very helpful. I appreciate that. I want to go actually to the picture now, not for purposes of shades of blue per se, but to see the U-turn, which is helpful when it's zoomed up. So if we can go up to the top of it.
So Ms. Mullen, yes, you probably know exactly we're going to what we've been calling the U-turn.
Right. It's
Right.
Dr. Trudell, it starts with that slanted arrow. At least maybe a third of the way between MW7 and the slant well. Do you see that?
Yes.
Is that correct? Is that where the U-turn starts?
Yes, you can see the FOSVA is labeled on this slide. It's gradually getting thinner and thinner as you go west, and then by the time you get to about the location you just noted, maybe slightly past that, it pinches out. And so that's where the FOSVA pinches out. That's where the U-turn happens.
Okay. And it starts to slant down in some lighter shade of blue and then it goes vertical into sky blue, if I could call it that.
Goes vertical up. What point are you referring to? It goes vertical in a couple of locations here.
I mean, down.
Yes, I realize that, but it goes down
Oh.
in a couple of different locations, so.
Okay. Do you see the dashed lines on the top above all the colors?
Yes,
So I'm going to count those to sort of give you an orientation. Is that okay?
sure.
Around line 5 or 6, it goes, or 7 goes vertical down into sky blue water. Now I'm really going to age myself.
I'm having trouble seeing that. Can you zoom in a little bit more, please? I apologize. The arrows on this particular version of this image are very faint and hard to see, and also not much color contrast.
So there's a dash next to some lime green with a vertical arrow in it, I believe, from sky blue to sky blue.
Yes.
Right next to the
Yes,
green.
okay. Yes.
see
I can see it now, yes.
Okay. So that water has traveled off the FOSVA into at least 9,000 TDS water, goes vertical into 9,000 TDS water, turns right, and it doesn't lose its TDS, does it?
Well, there's a zone there. Right, you pointed out where the arrow points downwards, and then overlapping that is an arrow pointing eastward to the right.
Mhm.
So that is an area where the shade of blue, if you will, is darker, which means it's fresher water than the sky blue color as you're referring to it. And so that's the primary area where that U-turn is occurring. And the darker shades of blue, because there's at least 2 or 3 of them there before you get into the sky blue color, is the area where the U-turn occurs and where the fresh water from the dune sand aquifer moves vertically downward into the upper 180-foot aquifer and then reverses flow direction to the east.
So we have, it looks like on this diagram you created, 2 vertical places, one into sky blue, which is about 9,000, and one into a little darker, which looks like it's about 7,000. And then it flows into a darker blue and regains it loses TDS there. Is that what your testimony is?
The TDS.
Section, I think that mischaracterizes the chart, but go ahead and answer if you can.
Certainly. It doesn't lose the TDS. There's fresher water of lower TDS that's moving downward into the upper 180-foot aquifer.
So that fresher water is not reflected by any arrows pointing down. Is that correct?
On this slide, it's hard to see. And there's a different version of this in my presentation, also in my rebuttal testimony, that has the arrows highlighted darker, so they're much easier to see. So there is flow downward where I'm describing it. I don't believe I can see the arrow on this version of the figure, but it does show on the other versions. So.
And that's
now-
Marina revised exhibit 67, slide 31, I believe.
Thank you. But I'm not ready to go there yet. Anything else, Ms. Meisenheimer?
No, I just wanted to provide you with the site to where he said we could see the arrows better.
So this was your direct testimony before you read any rebuttal testimony, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So as it continues east, it goes back to being sky blue. Is that correct?
Yes.
And it sits on top of the remainder of the upper 180-foot aquifer that is sky blue, correct?
Well, point of clarification here. That layer underneath the FOSDA at this point, it's model layer, I think 3, which was originally requested by CalAm as the lower dune sand aquifer. And the lower dune sand aquifer, that layer is on top of and hydraulically connected to the upper 180-foot aquifer. And so hydraulically, they're essentially the same unit, although there's slight differentiation in hydraulic properties between the two.
And they're mostly sky blue, correct? Both of them,
Yes.
which is 9,000 TDS.
I'd have to go back to the legend and see where in the shades of blue that particular color would be.
That's in the lower left-hand corner, Ms. Mullen, please.
Yeah, it looks to me like it's probably in the 7,000 to 9,000 range for that shade of blue.
Okay, and while we're here, what TDS would yellow be?
25,000 approximately.
Okay. So can we look at the lower 180? Which you have to go back to where we just were, sorry. So the lower 180 is 25,000 TDS?
Approximately, yes, I would say that, and probably the 20 to 25,000 range.
This is the no project example.
Yes.
And when both this profile and all the modeling work for MCWD was done, you were all, that's a really bad thing. You, Dr. Kincaid, Ms. Nelson, we're all working together, correct?
Yes.
And Ms. Nelson had shared all of her well data with you that she shared with us the other day, correct?
We use
Action
that.
vague as to all of her well data.
Yes.
Well, did she hold some back, Dr. Trudell?
I'm not sure which
Action
well
Lakes
data you're referring
Foundation.
to. Are you talking about water levels or groundwater
No, I'm
quality
talking about
data?
the well data she pointed to that said there was fresh water here.
Projection vague as to which well data.
Really? You guys want to keep going for another day and a half? We'll go pull up every slide.
It's simple. Do you mean the
Mr.
Fort Ord
Osias,
data
you're
at
asking-
Hold on.
NCWD 11?
Hold on, pause.
Mr.
let's-
Seiss, you are asking this witness whether Ms. Nelson provided everything she had. He doesn't have the personal knowledge there. So again, I think we can clean it up.
Here's what I propose, Mr. Osias, is that we go to Ms. Nelson and ask her what well data she provided to Dr. Trudell. I don't see,
Yes, she's here.
on my screen.
That's
I
fine.
assume she's here.
I'll
and
ask
available.
Ms. Nelson two questions about that, okay?
Okay. Do
Ms.
that.
Nelson, did you share with Dr. Trudell your groundwater quality data collected from all the well samples that you testified about?
So I provided to Dr. Trudell the contours that we established from the well data itself. But I think as he testified earlier, the actual well data were not necessarily provided. We did talk once we had transmitted, those contours about some of the specific information with regard to the CMEX wells. And so, no, we did not provide an extensive list of all of the water level data to Dr. Trudell. I think he testified earlier, he relied on our contours.
And we're not talking drawdown contours, we're talking TDS contours, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. So in light of all that, Dr. Trudell, is it your opinion that the lower 180-foot aquifer is not 25,000 TDS as depicted on this cross-section?
Well, okay, so this cross-section represents after 25 years of simulation time. So the data that I received from Ms. Nelson was initial concentration data. And so that's at time 0, not time 25 years. You can see with the direction of flow from west to east in the lower 180, in all likelihood, I don't have a version of this cross section that represents the initial conditions, but in all likelihood, those concentrations are increasing over the 25-year simulation period.
Can we just shrink this again a little bit? And see the caption in the lower right-hand corner is what I'm looking for. So this was using the MCWD model, correct, Dr. Trudell?
Correct.
While we're here, do you see the most left lime green cell?
At the top of the cross section?
It's the far left as high as you can go. There's a block of lime green.
Yes.
Shouldn't that be ocean water quality?
I don't believe so.
So that's not intended to be the, actually, let's scroll down a little bit so we can see that look, what's on top of that location word. There we go. You see the slant well?
Yes.
Is there that much land ocean side from the slant well?
I don't recall.
Isn't it pretty close to the coast?
Well, this just draws the location of the, I guess, the wellhead. Notice how it's a vertical line, so it doesn't show the slant portion of the well. It just shows the location of where the well exits to the ground.
Okay, so do you think from the wellhead to the edge of the ocean, the distance would include that green square?
It is shown that way.
Mr. Osias, can I just ask I'm curious whether there's a metric on this map. Ms. Mullen, do you mind scrolling down? Just now I want to know if there, maybe you're gonna tell me there isn't one in terms of distance, but
There isn't. That was why I was asking. What we know is the distance roughly between the slant well and monitoring well 7.
I see.
Yeah.
And we don't, but there isn't a metric for the map. Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Osias. Back to you.
So that's just, I mean, I was sort of asking you and expecting you to say that green square was a mistake, but now you're saying it's not ocean. Is that correct?
I can't know for sure. I don't recall exactly where this cross section was located. It does go through the slant well. That's not a projection. That's a cross section that goes between MW7 and the slant well. But in terms of the details of the cross section in that area, I really don't recall.
And you created this?
No, it was created by our modeling team. I did not create it personally.
Did you quality control check it?
Yes.
You were satisfied that it was accurate?
In terms of the aspects that I checked, yes.
If we could look at CalAm 190. PDF page 57. So this is a different graphical depiction using the MCWD model for 1B. You recognize this?
Yes,
And the yellow on this graphic is 5 to 15,000.
well, this is Cal-Am's representation of the cross-section we were just looking at. So they're using a different, they're not using color flood, they're using color intervals. And the yellow interval is 5 to 15,000. That's correct. That's what it's shown to be, yes.
Okay. And the lower 180 aquifer is fuchsia, for lack of a better label.
I'd call it that.
Are we
Low.
able to zoom in to that chart a little bit, Miss Mullen? It's a little hard to see the key.
It is. I keep leaning forward here. I have a small screen to work with.
Is that better?
Thank you.
Dr. Trudell, is that better for you?
Yes,
All right. Do you see where it says CEMEX?
yes,
Okay, and that's the MCWD model showing greater than 25,000 TDS.
yes.
All the way down.
It does show that. Well, again, it's shown as greater than 25,000. So yes,
Yeah, fair enough.
that's what it shows. That's their representation. I wasn't able to QA this work because it's not our work.
You couldn't run your model and reproduce this graphic if you use the same scale and color scheme?
Well, I mean, yeah, the scales are different, the color scheme's different. I mean, we weren't setting out to rerun Cal-Am's work. We were doing our own work. And so I guess in a different time frame of schedule, we might have been able to do more of that type of work, but not in the time that was available.
So while we're on this page, do you see under scenario 1B, the water year base period?
I'm not sure where you're looking.
I'm looking under the bolded words, scenario 1B, sort of bottom center. Do you want to, we can zoom in some more.
And I'm not seeing it.
It's okay. Let's try there. It's to the right.
It appears to be immediately to the left of the lower boxed title. So if you look to the left of that sort of TDS, you'll see scenario B with the semicolon, 1B
Oh,
with the
okay, I see,
semicolon.
okay. Yeah, scenario 1B, water year 2009 to 2021. Base period, no sigma implementation, no slant well pumping.
So this is, okay, so I appreciate Ms. Meinheimer trying to help. I can help navigating around. My question was, do you see the water year reference? Now you've read it, so the answer is yes, correct?
Yes,
And the water year for the base period is supposed to be 2009 to 2021, correct?
right.
And that corresponds to scenario B.
Yes, it does.
Now, we can take this down. And can we put up the order that I referenced?
That's the March 7th, 2023.
Yes, thank
Order.
you. And page 2. And scroll down. Do you see the sentence that says, it starts on the right-hand margin with the words, if the?
Yes,
Okay. Why don't you read that to yourself? Let me know when you're finished.
I'm finished.
Okay. And can we look at the next page? This table from the orders familiar to you, is it not, Dr. Trudell?
Yes,
Take your time.
yes, I've seen it before.
Having seen it before, do you believe you understand it?
It's a little bit confusing. Option B has always been defined, in my way of understanding, as 2009 to 2021. I believe that's Cal-Am's understanding as well.
Okay, and I'm not here to argue with you because we just saw that on that slide, correct? Said 2009 to 2021.
Sure.
I'm just
That's
asking if you remember, we saw that just like 2 slides ago.
Yes, that's
Okay.
that's what's on the slide, and this is what's on the table.
Okay. So I ask you to remember the text from the page before, but you see, option A is a calibration period of 2019 to 2021, correct?
Correct.
And option B is that calibration period adjusted. Do you see the word adjusted?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And the adjustment was to make it 2009 to 2021, correct?
That was my understanding. Yes.
Okay. And in fact, there was an email to the AHO, I think over my sending, but it was a joint report during the collaboration period saying that all the experts agreed to use 2009, 2021 for the option B scenarios, but to calibrate 2019 to 2021 for option A. Does that sound familiar to you?
That's my understanding. Yes.
Okay. And isn't it true that the MCWD scenario runs for option B, C, and D all used option A instead of an adjusted option B period?
Ms. Kenzie, Mark might not know that. I was responsible for that.
Well, let's see if he can answer first.
Okay,
Yeah,
fine.
I was just going to say I don't know the answer to that question. I'd have to check it out.
The answer is not true. We use the recharge values as directed.
I don't know. I'm not sure if you're thinking or if you have a follow-up question, Mr. Osias.
Thinking where I can show him that that's not true. But I might have to come back for that piece of paper. So we can take this down for a minute. Dr. Trudell, and before your counsel suggests it, I will be glad to show you if you wish, but it's a fairly general question. Both your direct and rebuttal testimony in several places references the work of Ms. Nelson, correct?
Yes, I do.
And it also references the work of Dr. Kincaid, correct?
Yes.
So is it correct that you're familiar with their work?
In general,
Objection Vegas to familiar.
Okay, would you like to define for us how well you know the work submitted by Dr. Kincaid and Ms. Nelson?
I don't really think that's a fair question. We worked together, but we worked in parallel. So they were working on their aspects of certain tasks, and I was working on our aspects of certain tasks. And certainly we met frequently. We talked frequently, and so I was aware of what they were doing. But we weren't providing weekly updates to each other of where we were or what we've done. We were working in parallel for the most part.
Okay, so I'm glad I asked the question as to sort of how rather than reaching a conclusion. When you were all finished with your separate parallel work, did you read their finished work product?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay,
In fact, we normally saw a draft before they submitted the final.
okay. So based on that, are you familiar with the work product they submitted to the AHO?
Yes.
Thank you. Can you show me in any of the direct or rebuttal testimony where model results for TDS changes at MCWD production wells is reported? And I say changes, meaning between with the project and without the project.
I can't.
Objection, this is, hold on, one moment, Mark. Objection, this is really overbroad. If Mr. Osias has questions about whether or not Dr. Kincaid or Ms. Nelson conducted work, those are really most appropriately put to them. They're here to answer that. And asking Dr. Trudell to remember offhand where to find things in reports, if they exist. I'm just not sure how this is productive.
I think it's productive because we'll narrow it down. He can tell me what he knows and we'll go from there.
Okay, I know what's in my submittals.
I should rule on the objection, which I am going to I am going to overrule it for now, and we'll see how Dr. Trudell, I think he can respond to the best of his ability. So we'll go with that. Go ahead, Mr. Trudell, Dr. Trudell.
Okay, I'm familiar with my submittals, and I don't recall preparing a table of the one that you just described, changes in TDS concentrations at MCWD production wells.
Okay, I'm not limiting you to a table. I'm not limiting you to a figure. Could be in words. In anything you have submitted in phase 2 or phase 3, did you identify changes in TDS as with the project compared to without the project at any MCWD production well?
I don't recall specifically.
Do you recall generally?
Mr. Osias, where are we going with this?
The answer is no, but he doesn't want to say that.
Well, I don't recall.
And there you have your answer. I think you can move on, Mr. Osias.
Okay. And I assume you don't recall whether any other of the Dr. Kincaid or Ms. Nelson has identified changes in TDS at an MCWD production well with and without the project as modeled, correct?
I don't recall. That question is better put to them, I would say, either of those two witnesses.
Now, in response to a question from the hearing officer regarding your particle track showing only 3B, do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay, and I believe you testified that the reason for that was because you weren't studying the difference between with and without project. You were just trying to show where the water went when pumping was going on. Is that a fair paraphrase of what you said?
No, that's an overstatement. For that specific slide and that specific topic, the focus was answering the AHO questions. In that case, it was question 3A. What happens to the seawater inflows outside of the capture zone, which by definition means it's a pumping scenario because there's no capture zone if there's no pumping. And so that was scenario 3B. And so that was the purpose of that particular graphic. And that was the answer that I gave to Ms. Kinsey.
Okay, so which graphic should we look at to find the answer to Ms. Kinsey's question of the modeled particle tracks and how they change from pumping to no pumping in your work?
In my work, I don't know that we specifically looked at that aspect. That's more related to the work that Dr. Kincaid was doing and also Ms. Nelson.
So the answer is you didn't do that, correct?
Not that I recall. Perhaps I did. I don't recall though.
Do you have an opinion on loss of storage?
Yes, I do.
How much storage is lost in the 180-foot aquifer?
We did not calculate loss of storage in the 180-foot aquifer. We only calculated loss of storage in the dune sand aquifer. As Mr. Ye has pointed out several times, you can't quantify storage changes in a steady state model, especially for a confined aquifer. But what you can do is compare the two scenarios: the non-pumping water levels in the dune sand aquifer and the pumping water levels in the dune sand aquifer to calculate drawdown, which in the drawdown by definition is the decline in groundwater levels caused by pumping. And that the amount of that decline integrated over the area of the cone of depression is the loss of storage due to the drawdown component only.
Dr. Trudell, you're an experienced modeler, correct?
I don't refer to myself as a modeler, but certainly I've used modeling in a very large number of projects, including some modeling that I've done myself.
Are you aware of any evidence submitted? So this is, I'm specific with those words. Are you aware of any evidence submitted that identifies the probability of the project ending in 25 years?
I understand that's the length of their permit, or the permit that's been applied for. I'm not sure exactly what the terminology is there. But I think the expectation is that if a permit is issued, it would be initially for a 25-year period.
My question's about, are you aware of any evidence about the probability of the project ending, meaning stopping pumping?
Oh, I have no idea.
No, that's not my question either. I understand.
When you ask me, am I aware? The answer is no.
Thank you. And there's no evidence submitted as to why the project might stop, correct?
I don't know what the future of the project is after any initial permit period. I mean, it may no longer be economical. There could be lots of reasons why it might stop. It could have environmental damage or consequences that were unanticipated. So I don't know what's going to happen to the project after 25 years.
Would your answer be the same after 63 years?
63 years has been proposed by CalM as the lifespan of the project, I believe. And you know, at the end of that 63-year period, I don't know if there's a requirement for the project to be shut down or if it could be extended. I don't know.
So just to remind you, my question was, are you aware of any evidence submitted regarding either probability of shutdown or what would cause a shutdown? I think the answer is you're not aware of it.
No, I'm not.
Thank you. Do you understand what in lieu recharge means?
Yes.
And you were present when the return water settlement agreement water was testified to by Dr. Ye?
Yes, I was. I attended the hearing during his testimony.
And you saw that they did, if I'm using the wrong words, correct me, but scenario runs at two different return water settlement percentages to show the impact?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Do you know if your team did any such runs?
I don't know.
Your team, I mean, you and the people who help you.
Oh, you mean at Marina? The Marina
No,
team?
I mean, you, Dr. Trudell, and anybody on your staff that assists you.
No, we did not.
Okay. Do you know if Dr. Kincaid did any such runs?
I don't know. You'd have to ask Dr. Kincaid that question.
At least you don't recall any, right?
I don't recall. No.
Okay. And same question regarding Ms. Nelson. Do you know if she did any such runs?
I don't recall, but again, that's a question better put to her.
Did the three of you discuss the return water settlement agreement?
No, I don't believe we did.
Okay. Are you familiar with the phrase degradation of groundwater quality?
Do you have a context for that?
Testimony that came into this proceeding in the last several days.
I know, I understand generally what that means. It can mean different things, in different cases, but generally I would say I understand what that means.
What does it mean to you?
A loss of groundwater quality typically caused by a change in concentrations, typically an increase in concentrations of either naturally occurring or synthetic contaminants would be a degradation in groundwater quality.
Is an increase of 1 TDS an example of degradation of groundwater quality?
Sorry, I don't understand the question. One, what?
One part per thousand, I think is what that would mean.
A part per thousand or 1 part per million? 1 part per thousand?
Either one.
Then in that case, certainly, because that's about 1,000 milligrams per liter increase in TDS. So that would definitely constitute a degradation in groundwater quality.
Okay, how about 1 in a million?
That's probably within a band of uncertainty around the characterization of groundwater quality. So again, it depends at 1 part per million of what. If you're talking 1 part per million of, say, a chemical like 1,4-dioxane.
No, I'm talking salinity. Sorry.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that wasn't clear.
No, it wasn't. That's why I said sorry.
So
let me rephrase. If salinity goes up from 29,999 to 30,000, that's a change of 1. Is that evidence of groundwater degradation of groundwater quality?
I would not consider it so.
Okay. What if it went up, same numbers, but it went up by 10 instead?
It's certainly not an improvement. If it goes up, then you're getting into the area where I would consider that to be a degradation in groundwater quality, even in terms of salinity.
So if something changed from 29,999 to 30,009, that would be an example of degradation of groundwater quality.
Could you restate that question, please?
Yeah, I'm just trying to add 10 to 29,999. And the result is 30,009.
And 9.
That
Yes.
change in salinity, an example of degradation of groundwater quality.
Well, I would say it does, because the fact that groundwater quality to the single, to the digits, number of digits, 5 significant digits, 29,999, suggests that you understand the groundwater quality to that level of precision and accuracy. So, if you can then determine that the groundwater has increased, TDS or salinity has increased by 10, then that starts to get beyond the level of the uncertainty and inaccuracy or precision of the measurements that you're talking about. So I would say that would constitute a degradation in groundwater quality.
I was going to say 10 seconds, but that's clearly not accurate. At least a minute, please.
Sure.
Could we go to 60, Marina, 67, slide 16.
And did you want the revised version, I assume?
I'm sorry, I said six, I meant slide 18. Do I want, yes, I think that's the only ones we're using, isn't it?
Uh,
At least at the
I hope
moment.
so.
Well, we'll see. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Mullen. Now, I think you had a question also from the hearing officer on this, but I was a little confused by your figure. So let's start with the yellow shading. Do you see that?
Yes,
Would you like the picture bigger?
I can see it. It's fine.
Okay. So in the legend, it says layer 6 intrusion area, if I am reading it correctly. Is that right?
That sounds right. Yes, I can't actually read that, but it sounds right.
And this is MCWD model,
Yes,
and layer 6 is what?
lower 180-foot aquifer.
Okay. Intrusion area means what?
So this is a situation where the seawater inflow outside of the capture zone of the test net wells is intruding into basin groundwater. And so the intrusion zone that's mapped here in yellow represents how far that intrusion would occur simply by advection. In other words, with the flow of groundwater, with the flow of groundwater from the coastline inland over a 25-year period with project pumping, obviously.
But it doesn't show how much would occur without project pumping anyway, correct?
No, because again, this is answering the question: what happens to seawater inflows that are not captured by the slant well or occur outside of the slant well capture zone? So this is looking at that question. In 25 years, it goes as far as what's shown here as the yellow shaded patch, and then continues over time beyond that, which is where the particle traces go further off to the right.
And I believe you constructed the yellow by literally connecting the dots,
Yes, exactly.
which is rarely a literal expression. Usually it's a euphemism, but
No, it's not a metaphor. It's what we actually did. Yeah. And that's exactly the same way you generally produce a capture zone too, is just connect the dots at the ends of the particle traces.
okay, so that's 25 years, but the particle tracks are going past the dots. And what's the time scale on those?
The time scale varies. And so individual particle traces have different travel times. I believe overall, the time period is unlimited. But the particle traces in many cases end before they reach the model boundary, because they are oftentimes intercepted by pumping wells or other hydrogeologic features.
And did you use a 1500 TDS standard for the intrusion edge?
No, this is not a seawater intrusion edge. It has nothing to do with concentrations. These are just particle traces. And so the seawater is 33,500 milligrams per liter. We're not simulating that. That requires the transport model. For the particle tracking, we just take water that's inflowing from the ocean at the shoreline at 33,500 milligrams per liter and migrating it forward in time with the flow of groundwater, that's advection, to the point where the black dot appears on the particle trace. So it's coming in at 33,500 milligrams per liter. And if it was flowing by plug flow, in other words, no dispersion, which is not represented in particle traces, then at that point, it would be 33,000, give or take, milligrams per liter.
Okay, so the yellow isn't a defined TDS area. It's just the edge of where the particles would be in 25 years.
Where the seawater inflows would be after 25 years based on the particle tracing. Yes.
But it's not all seawater, so you can't tell whether that's 500 TDS, 1,000 TDS, 1,500 or more, correct?
Correct, and that's why you do the transport model, because this gives you a part of the answer, but it doesn't give you the complete answer.
Right. So why is it labeled intruded? Because the particle went there?
Because the seawater inflows are simulated to go there. These are new seawater inflows. So,
well, how do you know how do you know they're new?
Because we start at time zero in the flow model, and then migrate those particles forward in time by 25 years, or well, 25 years in the case of the black dots.
But if they would have gone there anyway, then they're not really new, correct?
It's an argumentative.
No, it's a question.
Mr. Osias, I think but I understand you're making a distinction between there. I don't know if there's actually confusion here or if you're asking the question just to make sure I'm not confused, but let me tell you my understanding, which is I understand that Dr. Trudell is saying, no, this is not, this movement is new because we start with time zero and now we're at time 25. So it's new in that respect. And Mr. Osias, you're making the distinction that with respect to whether or not new is related to whether or not there's the slant wells are pumping.
Right.
It's a different use of the word new. So I see that dynamic. I don't know if you still think your question is necessary.
No.
Thank you.
And now I'm going to go to a new one.
Good.
Can we go to page 22? You remember testifying about this slide?
Yes, I do.
And ignoring the bolded letters in the title, this is a comparative slide of OWP, correct?
It is.
So on this slide, show me where beneficial uses are discussed.
Beneficial uses aren't discussed on this slide.
Okay.
Oh, except in the title, because the ocean water percentage is related to beneficial uses insofar as the freshwater percentage, which is the 100% minus these numbers. In other words, say 12% or 6%. That's a loss of fresh water from the landward side of the pumping slant wells. And that loss of fresh water or fresher water represents a loss of beneficial uses.
Is there a model output that you're aware of that identifies the TDS of the brackish water extracted by the slant wells?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Could you restate that, please?
Is there model output that you're aware of that identifies the TDS of the brackish water extracted by the slant wells? And as compared to the ocean water, we know the TDS of the ocean water.
Right. Yes, those calculations have been done. That's the basis for calculating the ocean water percentage.
Okay, so my question was, is there a model output that identifies the TDS of the brackish water?
I would
You're
expect,
aware,
sorry,
that you're aware of.
that I'm aware of. My understanding is that all of the transport models that include the scenario 3B, which is slant well pumping, produce output that is in terms of TDS, and then that TDS is converted into ocean water percentage. So my understanding is that output is available from each of these models.
Okay. Without belaboring this, I hope, can we go to slide 31? This is just a bolder version of what we were looking at before.
Actually, it's a newer version.
Oh, sorry. So let me ask my question. Why is
Sorry.
there no vertical scale?
The vertical scale and the horizontal scale, I believe, are in the original figure in my written rebuttal testimony. For the purpose of keeping the slide simple and visible, only the graphic was cropped from that slide or from that figure to put into this slide. There's a reference on the bottom there to the source figure. Marina 61, figure 59A.
Okay. Thank you. Can we go to Marina 61? Yeah. The PDFs don't print on these big figures, at least when I print them off, but it is 59A.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Ms. Mullen, it's Marina 61. And it's 3 pages in from the back. There we go. Why don't you scroll out so we can see it? Is this what you were thinking had a vertical scale?
I thought it did. Yes, I was mistaken.
Okay. So if we go to 60, figure 60, I'm sorry, which is 2 more pages. Perhaps this is what you were thinking that had the vertical scale.
Well, this one does have a vertical scale, but I believe that our cross-section figure had a vertical and a horizontal scale as well. I was mistaken.
Okay, but this is your work product now, right?
Oh yeah, this is hang on. No, this is CalAm's model. So this is their figure 90, I believe. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. My apologies, but I have notes on the original and on the revised. So that's why I'm paging through here. Unless this is helpful, so I'll leave it up, but it's up to you, Dr. Trudell. I wanted to ask you about the hydraulic gradient without pumping at the CEMEX site.
Yes,
Do you have an opinion about whether it's landward or seaward on the CEMEX property?
on the CEMEX property?
Yeah.
And you're talking about the horizontal hydraulic gradient, not the vertical?
Yes, yes, I am talking horizontal.
Okay. Well, my understanding of the horizontal gradient at the CEMEX site depends which hydrostratigraphic unit you're in. So in the dune sand aquifer, heads are in all cases above sea level. And since 2019 or so, maybe even before that. And so there's the horizontal gradient is directed seaward in the dune sand aquifer. In the upper 180, it's directed landward. And then immediately beneath the CEMEX site, you can see there's an arrow pointing to the right, which is a landward directed gradient, and a landward directed gradient before the U-turn. So when the recharge water from the dune sand aquifer flows downward into the upper 180, it picks up the regional gradient that's landward in the upper 180 due to historic pumping further to the east.
So this is a yes or no question to start with. Were you involved in the decision of how to model the ocean boundary heads?
Not directly, no. I was informed of what was going on, but I wasn't involved in the decision making.
And I take it from that, then you also weren't involved in any discussion about moving those heads closer to the shore.
No, I was not.
Okay. The agency, meaning the Monterey County Water Resources Agency,
Okay.
maps seawater intrusion without dividing up the 180-foot aquifer. You're familiar with that?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. Is that because you were listening to the last several days, or did you actually investigate and know that?
I've looked at those maps and I understand that's how they were prepared.
Okay. And are you aware that there's a prohibition of new wells in the 180-foot aquifer?
Not aware of that.
Did you look at the Montgomery and Associates model at all?
No, I did not.
So that would mean you have no opinions about anything in it, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. That's good. Unless my colleagues want to send me a question that I've forgotten, I believe that's all I have at the moment.
So just to confirm, Mr. Osias, unless your colleagues tell you otherwise, you have completed your questions for Dr. Trudell.
That's what I just said. I'm giving like 10 seconds to blow up my screen.
Right, with the caveat that, you know, you haven't necessarily made all your objections yet. I understand that.
Yeah.
Well, I think maybe the thing to do then would be to take a break. And when we return, who are you planning to, what are we? We're 3:30, so we have time to, no, we don't, because we're stopping at 4 because it's Friday.
Not just because it's Friday, but it's good enough reason.
Holidays, yeah. I meant because of this particular, and the holidays. So I could give you back some time, and well, this is, I'm also stalling a little bit so that your colleagues can let you know if you forgot a question. But I think one of the things we do need to talk about before we break until I have it in my notes, but September 26th is what I have off the top of my head.
That's
to
correct.
reconvene on September 26th at 9 o'clock. One of the things that came up was that what sounds like I anticipate are evidentiary objections that may be somewhat detailed and have to involve references to transcripts of what happened before I was involved. I realize that you may not know all of your objections, Mr. Osias, because you haven't completed your cross-exam of all the witnesses, but it sounds like you anticipate some things, and I had indicated that it would be very helpful if I could have those in advance of September 26th. So that I could look at some of these references before September 26th, and that would shorten our time. My proposal would be to set out a date for your team to submit objections in writing so that I could prepare myself. I realize, you know, this allows the opposing sides to prepare themselves too, which is probably fair. But what do you, Mr. Osias, do you have a suggestion as to an appropriate date to do that?
Sadly, I almost always have opinions, but since I'm going to be tied up in Colorado River meetings, I'm not going to be jumping
Not
on them.
you.
Right. And the person I'm hoping will handle it is under the weather. So
well, let me,
could I submit a proposed schedule for that? Or if somebody, that won't be me probably, but you know, a
the
proposed
deadline would be
schedule.
sometime next week, but maybe I'll look to Mr. Brochard, who's off mute. You may have an opinion about whether you want a chance to respond in writing to whatever is submitted. And I hope these won't be long objections. I mostly want it in writing just so I can get the references in
Right.
front of
I
me.
think that's what's relevant.
Yeah.
So I imagine that Mr. Osias will be prepared to object to the city's exhibits at this time. I don't know that he will be for any Marina Coast stuff, so I don't want to speak out of turn there. My concern right now is I'm concerned that one day is not going to be enough to finish cross, redirect, recross, and then in evidentiary hearings and anything else we're doing. And I know you had suggested yesterday that maybe we do all the evidentiary stuff at a later hearing where the experts don't need to be there. Because I know, like I said, me and Mr. Osias talked yesterday, and we all talked with our experts, and everybody's available on the 26th. And then after that, it
gets tough.
It is sporadic.
All right.
As you heard, I know Mr. Osias is going to be unavailable for a good portion of next week. I know I'm supposed to be going into a different trial. I'll find out Monday when that's going to be. So that's my concern. And then one other concern is, I know we're all kind of working on our closing briefs and our sections of the draft report, but I don't think we're going to even have, all the hearings done until the 26th. And then it's going to take us a little bit to get the transcripts from this week and from that last one. And that's going to make it very difficult for us to get that done by October 16th. Which is
and I'll just to take away any surprise, my intent was once we scheduled out the last hearing day that there would need to be a corresponding change in the submittal deadline based on however many days that is. That makes sense to me. I know we don't want to drag this on forever. Now, I don't think that's necessarily the case with evidentiary objections. It does mean that you won't exactly, you know, I realize we have to resolve those before you know exactly what is in and out, but I think you can be working towards that in the meantime. So if we do need to schedule a follow-on day, we have September 26th. If we need a follow-on day to deal with, possibly to deal with procedural issues, just to make sure we get through the witnesses, that's on a day that's later than the 26th. It would be late. It would have to be after the 26th, I think. I don't know that I would extend it further. So let's, I mean,
And that makes sense, because it's easy to just, if you sustain objections, it's easy to just cross something off. It's much harder to cite to evidence that hasn't been presented, or
I'll give you that. I don't know. I mean, I want to give you what is fair due. Crossing something off is sometimes not so easy, but so let's start with this math, because I can do at least this math. If we are setting out, we're not completing today, we're setting out to the 26th, which is 11 additional days, right?
yes.
I'm just doing math, basic math here. I think I can handle it. So our initial submittal date for the proposed draft reports, if that's the appropriate term for it, whatever we're calling it, was October 16th. You add 11 days, that puts us at October 27th. So at this point, that would be my intent. Would that be that those submittals, the deadline would change from October 16th to October 27th? Assuming that's a day.
Might it be possible to push that to October 31? On our team, in the hopes that we would be done by October 16, we have some vacations now planned in that stretch that would make the 27th difficult.
That is reasonable. Do you, October 31st is fine. I mean, we can do a close of business. So, you know, so if any of you have small children, October 31st is an important day. For others of us, it's less important.
Take the candy to your break.
Getting these in will be a good reason to celebrate that evening.
Ms. Kinsey, I do have a couple follow-up questions that came in. Okay, they won't take very long.
Great. So we have October. We'll see our best to get through some of this. So October 31st will be the new deadline, and I'll put out a something official so we have all of this in writing. And then also notice the new hearing day of September 26th. We still haven't resolved the issue of written submittals for evidentiary objections, although we also haven't resolved the issue that we may need another day to do those. I assume that the lawyers would need an opportunity to, it would be more efficient to meet and confer about what other days might work. And then maybe submit, what I would ask is that you submit a proposal to me just in writing, to the AHO in writing, as to what day after September 26th we should also schedule where the attorneys would be available. The expectation is that the witnesses would not need to be available on that day. And we would deal with any remaining procedural objections.
Well, Ms. Kinsey, two quick things.
Yes.
Similar to the hearing on the 26th, it'd be helpful if we knew what dates you were available for those hearings that we could potentially be to confer on. And then the other point, as we were looking at the exhibits that have been admitted, we noted that the exhibit form for Marina and Calam have been filled out, and the one that used to be filled out for us is now blank. So it would be helpful if someone could update that on the AHO website, or if you need us to do anything, let us know.
I'll find out about that and we'll get that addressed. Thank you. So let me tell you when I'll tell you when we're not available. That may be a start. The AHO is not available September 29th. I will not be available, and therefore the AHO will not be available the afternoon of October 2nd, and I will not be available all day October 5th and 6th. But then to my knowledge, it looks like the AHO is available anytime the week of October 9th. And I'm hoping with those weeks blocked out, you can find something in there.
Should be plenty of time.
Thank you.
Thank you. So a proposal on when to deal with evidentiary objections, and then also I think maybe submitting at the same time a proposal about when at least a written references to support the evidentiary objections would be submitted to the AHO. Mr. Osias, do you think an appropriate date for submitting those would be, what day is it? If I'm not necessarily dealing with it on the 26th, but it would be good to have those in mind by September 22nd, the next Friday, a week from today.
Sure.
And then just to close this out, if we have time, Mr. Osias, I'll give you a chance to ask your final follow-up questions, but I just want to look to the room before we reach that hard stop at 4 o'clock. Did I address everything we need to address before we break, with understanding that I'm going to get proposals about when we should meet to deal with procedural issues, including evidentiary objections after September 26th? We have this deadline for submitting at least the references to documents to support evidentiary objections by September 22nd. We are going to change the deadline for submission of proposed draft language for the report to October 31st. Is there anything else we should talk about before we break, because we won't see each other again in person in theory until September 26th? By in person, I mean virtually in person. Okay. With that, maybe I will turn back to you, Mr. Osias, and we'll see if we can finish up with Dr. Trudell.
Thank you. Dr. Trudell, I want to talk to you again about
Okay.
calibration under scenario B. And you were acknowledging that the years, and they were agreed upon, was 2009 to 2021. Do you remember that questioning?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm going to object. I think that misstates the record. I think the calibration was a different period, but the water years for the scenario was different.
For B, that's what I was talking about for B. It was different. It was 2009 to 2021. Is that okay, Mr. Bouchard?
Well, maybe this is my
We
confusion.
can put the table back up.
Yeah, I think you just mean for the scenario B, because you
I
said
do.
calibrated, and the I think we've all established the
Sorry.
calibration thing.
For scenario B, we're to use, I'm starting with the years, because that's the easy part. So I'm struggling now, apparently. But I want to make sure Dr. Trudell's following along. So 2009 to 2021 was something for scenario B, correct?
I think it's referred to as a hydrologic period.
Perfect.
For scenario B.
Okay. And it related to using water levels for that period, correct?
Sorry, could you restate that?
Yes, it's the water levels. The water level measurements for the period 2009 to 2021 is what is referenced for that hydrologic period to be used.
No, not really. I don't think so. I believe the reference for the hydrologic period has more to do with the recharge and precipitation record for that period of time, as opposed to the water levels. The water levels weren't really used in that scenario B. Water levels, as far as I know, weren't used.
Well, we agree with that. The water levels weren't used, but you're saying, I believe, correct me now, this is your chance, that scenario B was not intended to use water levels. It was intended to use recharge.
Right. It's not, the model was not recalibrated to water levels. That's what you would use water levels for, is to recalibrate the model to a different set of water level readings. And that wasn't done for scenario 1B, for example. But the hydrologic period includes a different precipitation history and a different recharge rate then and to some extent different boundary conditions, then the actual calibration period, which was scenario A.
Okay, can we go to Marina Exhibit 58? Page 11. Scroll down. And then keep going. There we go. Do you see paragraph 26?
Yes.
And what is the first sentence of scenarios of paragraph, sorry. What does the first sentence of paragraph 26 say?
So scenarios A and B differ in that scenario B calibrates the model without the project, aka alternative 1, to the lower overall water levels during the 2009 to 2021 period.
Does that refresh your recollection that it was the water levels that was supposed to be used in scenario B and not recharge?
Objection, that misstates his prior testimony. I don't think they're inconsistent.
Ms. Kinsey, I was also responsible for the model calibration, and Mark is talking about work that I did. So I think it would be
Time
more
out.
clear.
This is Dr. Trudell's written testimony. Let's start with that, okay?
We'll start with Dr. Trudell, and then I would like to hear from Dr. Kincaid, but certainly I'd like to hear from Dr. Trudell. I'm going to overrule the objection. Dr. Trudell is capable of, I think, verifying what he said and what he understands here. So please go ahead.
Okay.
So perhaps to help Dr. Trudell, I'm just taking longer. He should read the whole paragraph 26, not just this part on this page.
Should we scroll down? That
Okay.
seems fair.
Yeah. Okay. So,
Sorry,
that's
I've lost the top part of paragraph 26 there, I think.
so go back to the fire page.
Compared to scenario A. Okay, next page, please. Okay.
And without asking about anything that Dr. Kincaid did, I'm asking you, your testimony is that the difference between scenario A and scenario B is the water levels are different to be used, correct? That's your testimony.
I'd like to clarify that. That was my understanding at the time. Part of the confusion arises from the table that was put forward in the March 7th order by the AHO. All of the scenarios were referred to as calibration, which tended to confuse, I think, just about everyone as to whether we were recalibrating for every scenario or we just did calibration once for scenario A and then used that calibrated model for the remaining scenarios, which use the hydrologic period of 2009 to 2021, but didn't involve any recalibration of the model. So what I have in paragraph 26 there, it was my understanding what was being done at the time, but I would say that it should be restated that there was no actual calibration. The hydrologic period included lower water levels, but those water levels weren't for scenario B, the longer hydrologic period, but those water levels weren't used for model calibration. So that's what that paragraph should be reworded to state, as opposed to
Can we go back to
misunderstanding that's in that paragraph presently.
we see the beginning of the paragraph again? So what was done, Dr. Kincaid, is it was calibrated to recharge, correct?
The recharge was included in the calibration process exactly as I said it would be, and discussed it with everybody, including Mr. Lilly in the hearings. Yes, it was. Recharge was one of the calibration factors.
And
But that said, recharge only in the DSA was a calibration factor.
so, Dr. Trudell, we should not believe what you wrote here in paragraph 26, correct?
This paragraph states my understanding of what was being done at the time this was written. But it also represents my misunderstanding that scenario B was an alternative calibration scenario, because that's what it was referred to, or alternative, sorry, calibration scenario, because that's what it was referred to by the AHO. But I think there was agreement among all the parties that scenario B would be used as a base case or baseline case for scenarios C and D, but didn't involve recalibration of the model. So that was my misunderstanding at the time I wrote this.
And can we see the date that you wrote this? Or do you remember?
Ooh, I'm gonna say sometime in August, maybe July
Of 2023.
2023. Yeah.
Okay. And as we just heard from Dr. Kincaid, would you agree then, Dr. Trudell, that how Marina Coast did their model and how CalAm did their model, although each labeled B, are different?
I don't think I understand the question. Could you restate that, please?
Yep. Isn't it true that CalAm utilized observed water levels for 2009 to 2021 in calibrating its model for scenario Bs, and MCWD did not?
Oh, I'm not aware of that. As far as I know,
No.
nobody recalibrated their model for
Yes.
scenario B.
Thank you. That's all.
That's all, Mr. Osias. You are completed your
Yep.
cross-examination, at least for now.
And I've completed my time, so I appreciate the accommodation at all ends.
All right. Well, I think we already wrapped up and concluded that we had dealt with the issues we needed to deal with today. So I will see all of you at 9 o'clock on September 26th. And happy holidays for those of you who are celebrating.
Thank
And
you.
have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Thank you.